We're on, guys. Hello.
I should go.
Sorry, I mean, the fact that the room isn't empty already makes me happy. What with all of the
I'm so sorry.
that was so elegant. That was so elegant. Fantastic. I'm 50. I admire you. The fact that the room isn't empty already means so much to me. Thank you, guys. I mean, there are strikes and bus diversions and all this. Thanks for being here. Hands up, who's here the first time? Oh, okay. And the rest of you, you most likely miss Debs. So who the fuck is this scruffy guy? Debs, bless her, she's in the States. She does the cheerleading for her daughters, and currently that cheerleading group, which is in the hands of Debs, is #1 in the States, supposedly. She's doing a cracking job. Well, you'll have to put up with me, basically, now. Here we are. I'm Hal. I've been coming here. Canada Square, before, how many years does this go back? So, can't remember.
Gotta be 10 or 15 years.
COVID has destroyed my memory, so I won't
Yeah, same
remember
as
this
same
next
as me.
month.
Yeah.
But I've been coming here since it was at Canada Square. I'm doing my own munch, shameless self-promotion, the London Metal Munch, where all of you lovely Kingsters with fantastic taste in music can come along. And this is kind of what this is about. So if you've got any questions, you always wanted to have a half-decent answer. I'm a therapist, I'm not an oracle. I can't give you all of the answers you most likely really crave, but I have been working as a therapist for just over a decade. I've been a Kingster since I got transfixed with Johnny Weissman as living at a loincloth. And I was 6 years old.
Yeah, that's big.
And then it was Billy Idol.
Mm.
Yeah. My God, that was many years back. And then eventually, in the process of elimination, I went from one job to the other now, ended up doing mental health. I'm a bloke with very limited talent. I can't do anything else, but I've been doing so far a good job with this one. This one is recorded, so if you don't want your voice to be, if you just let the show know and he's going to edit it out. I also have to give you the microphone so you don't
Record you going to the loo.
record me having a piss. Okay. I think that's that. Over to you guys. When you're on. Silence.
Okay, we actually only prepared 1 minute ago. Normally I have notebook questions. Just, I have a friend, seriously, actually, and this person doesn't know what to identify as. And I've been pondering about her, and I'm just wondering if you could have some insight.
Yeah.
She's a very dominant person in her relationship. She basically is the boss. And she, in play with other people, she's very much in control. She's very into ultra uber violence. That's partially probably down to like 30 odd years of extreme martial arts training.
Cool.
So A, she can give it, and B, she can take it really hard. So she comes across initially as pretty much a dom. Yeah? But I think at her heart, that one of the things that she fantasizes about is actually being dominated by somebody else with, uber dom, uber violence,
Cool.
really, really hard.
Cool.
But she doesn't quite know what to actually sort of, for want of a better word, label herself. I kind of err on, what do you call somebody who's a submissive, very, very deep down, but overly, outwardly is pretty dominant?
How your friend would call any pronouns herself?
Probably her.
How she would call herself is actually going to be up to her. I would recommend tell her to go to munches, tell her to go to play parties. Sociologists call it identity construction. So the more you guys come to the NAM, the more you guys come to the munches, to play parties, that's how you find out about yourself, what you're into, what works for you, what doesn't. It's a process of exploration.
Yeah.
And the more she gathers the experience through the interactions with others, the more she's going to be more certain who actually she is. This is actually the point of munches. The more you talk about the experiences of other people, how they have been doing it, the more you're going to be inspired yourself. There barely is a different way around this. Otherwise, she's just going to ruminate up here.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I wondered if there's a distinction between a dom who likes a more feisty kind of interaction versus a dom who likes a sub to be very passive and submissive. And
It's a big
not-
spectrum.
Yeah.
And that's the point. It's also dependent who she plays with.
Yeah.
You know, it's the commonalities, the mutuality of the play partners. What's really important is that there's a chemistry, that there's a level of trust. Something else I'm always on my soapbox of, don't rush. Tell her as well to give the time to explore, to build trust. The more you trust someone, the more you can push gradually the boundaries. And eventually she's going to know as well what she's into, what not, what works for her, what doesn't. Don't rush it, kids. Don't rush it.
That's me, folks. It's all waiting for you now.
I've noticed this for people who are new in the scene. They just want to do the whole list. No, step by step.
What advice would you give to someone who, even though there have been no external factors to make them feel ashamed about their kinks, and in fact has actually been quite positive because of their own internal thought track, has kink shame that holds them back?
Good, let's talk about shame. Oh, God. Shame, and that's a running, if there's one running, I also forgot to warn you, there's a bingo list here, supposedly. Thank you, I'm going to get back to you, but and this is one of the key words you guys will hear a couple of times, and Sean is going to shout, bingo. Certain tag
Not just me.
words- Oh, you as well. Nice. But there's a reason why actually tag words, keywords repeatedly come up in OC, and that is one of that. Because shame is really something inherently you've been given most likely in one form or another from your parents, who say most likely gotten from their parents. You might have picked up something from your social environment in your childhood. Those are the subconscious thing. CBT therapists, they call it schemas. It comes from the Greek word template. We all have been given our own templates. What is the template? What is the first relationship we witness in our lives, kids? That of our parents. So however we witnessed that relationship is going to be a bit of a template for our own subsequent relationships, unless we really gain awareness. Part of that might be what you've been given there. You might have picked up how they talk to each other, how your mum has been brought up, how your dad has been brought up. And subconsciously we perpetuate it. And then we realize that we're LGBT, that we're kinksters, and then we find a bit of a clash, and that's when we really need to tackle it. You make a conscious decision. You tell yourself, whenever you notice the slight tinge of shame coming up, be aware of it and tell yourself, no, this is something from my childhood. I don't need this anymore. You focus on the here and now. What you do, your common actions now, is you, the kinky adult self that you are now. Your past self doesn't need you anymore. You forge your identity, by the way, with your common actions, the common interactions with the people who are on the same wavelength like you. And the more you bring awareness to your likes, your dislikes now, the more you can disentangle yourself from what you still know from your childhood days, what still reverberates on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's totally.
Yep.
I was just going to say, is that the Deb's bingo word, epigenetics?
Kind of, yes. Oh, thanks for the reminder. Yes.
You don't get to play. You don't get to play.
but actually, yes, this is kind of that. Transgenerationally, you might have been given something which might have just been part of the upbringing from your family tree. You all have got this. It could have been alcoholism in some family trees, or slight predilection for addictions. It might have been a particular religious streak or a very conservative upbringing and all of the grammar that comes with it.
But the question is, has anyone not heard of the phrase epigenetics? Do you want to explain that one?
Epigenetics. Oh, by the way, if you really want to geek out about this, Gabor Mate, he's one of fantastic bloke. He's a Hungarian Jewish Canadian neuroscientist and psychologist. He describes various experiments. One of the key experiments he also alludes to is that was in Japan. Mice have been given the smell of cherry blossoms. They were on a slight electrical current whenever they smelled the cherry blossoms. They got kids. Guess what happened to the baby mice as soon as they were given the smell of cherry blossoms,
Stress hormones.
they also came up with stress hormones. Guess what happened to their kids? So when those mice had maybe 5 baby mice, 3 of them came up with stress hormones as soon as they smelled the cherry blossoms. That applies especially for mammals. Another example which Gabor Mate gives, they've done tests with mother rats. Rats, they nurture their babies by licking them regularly. When they have been artificially separated as part of an experiment, those baby rats who didn't got enough licking showed up with higher stress levels. They withered, they had a lower fat ratio, and they died quicker. And this is something that applies to all of us. We need the nurture, we need relationships that work for us. This is how we bloom as a species. Otherwise, we literally wither. And in fact, if we don't get nurturing relationships, we are most likely in an abusive relationship. This is another thing why we do this. I can't stress enough for you guys to regularly practice to put the cards on the table and to authentically, transparently talk. This works for me, this doesn't. And seek to coordinate it with your partner, with your play partners, family members, friends. I don't make a difference what relationships we're talking about. We always have to make sure, to the best of our abilities, that the relationships we've got in our lives kind of work. And we also have to practice to peacefully agree to disagree when we really clash. My God, if we would practice this collectively, we'd be in a better world. So I need to keep hydrated.
Yeah.
So it's not even booze.
Oh,
Not yet, anyway.
There was something else. I know you guys put past the camera. I just
That's
wanted to be going. Aftercare. What does that look like? How is that different for different people? Like, what are the different?
Check with the people before.
So if
Before you
someone's
go-
completely new, what does that mean? What is aftercare?
Check with the people what you normally do to keep yourself safe. Check with a play partner. What do you do to bring yourself to a safe level to boost yourself when your mood is low?
But if they've never played before,
It's different for everyone, isn't it?
Then I would take very small steps. Check even during the session, does this work for you? The traffic light system, you guys know this? I would really check, are we in green area? You okay? And as soon as it goes to amber, I'll take a break so that it even doesn't get that he or she might have a massive crash, sub drop. Small steps, especially if you're playing with someone for the very first
I
time.
usually ask new play partners what calms them down, irrespective of play. What makes them feel the most calm? Some people just like watching cartoons, for instance. What makes them feel happy? Where do they feel the most comfort? And then work backwards from that.
Check as an example, do you like a hug afterwards? Some like it, some don't.
Some like to be left alone. Some
Precisely.
people like to have contact.
Particular piece of music. Music works fantastically for many people.
Some love chocolate.
Take care with chocolate, supposedly sugar
Yes.
spike, but it might work for some people. Nuts, protein, just to keep people stable. And as I said, small steps, especially for the very first time.
And is aftercare universal for everybody?
Individual to the person you're playing with. Everyone has different needs, and everyone will have a different way to keep himself or herself stable afterwards.
Did you mean
So-
does everybody need it?
Yeah.
They need it at different times and different degrees of
Yeah.
aftercare.
It's also I've also seen it because I've just playing with a new partner. It could be days later. So I check in after we finish playing. You okay? Yeah. When they get home, you still feeling okay? Following day, you still feeling okay? 2 days later, you still feeling okay? 3 days later, feeling okay? That's all right.
Anything else after that is your problem.
Seriously, I
Well,
would-
no. It's just that she actually told me in the discussion before. She said it can take anything up to 3 days for something to land
Yeah.
by the time they processed it.
Yeah.
Not just that, it's the processing as well. It's not this. So we always talk about the the endorphins, the adrenaline, the serotonin, and everything else. But then it's just sometimes your brain doesn't process it until, oh yeah, I did that on Sunday, bang, and that could be
With some it does take longer. It's
Yeah.
called a physical equilibrium until they're back to the normal hormonal balance. It's a good idea to check days after. I would say in one form or another, people need some kind of a calm down.
I mean, it was just a case of good morning, how you feeling? Not, we did this on Friday, did you feel really done? Just good morning, all right, yeah, I'm cool, okay, all right, cool.
Any feedback as well?
Yes.
What did work? What did work for you? What didn't?
She said do it harder next time.
Nice.
But that's what I wanted, because you don't go in hard straight off, you go, yeah, you can go more next time. It's like, rock on.
Or is there a danger that someone could present as submissive and it's actually masking more self-esteem?
If you have doubts, forge the bond first, forge the relationship first, get to know the person as good as you can. If you have got any doubts, if you aren't sure, I would address it. In one form or another, they would show up with some kind of inconsistencies. If you feel that it's something quite right, before it comes to any play session, I would tackle that first and see to resolve it. Sometimes people don't quite know, haven't quite forged their identity, they aren't quite sure what they're at. And this is before we get to a lot of people really confusing what their emotional needs are as opposed to what their sexual needs are. And bringing this together to some coherent picture is a life task. And the more you can forge a bond of friendship and a good level of trust, the less that hopefully is an issue. But if it is, I would address it. See things to be as transparent as you can. Always put the cards on the table. Even if it is an uncomfortable discussion, don't be afraid of that. Sometimes what you get to hear before it comes to a session might not be what you'd like to hear, but at least someone is honest. And it's the honesty that's going to be much better for you for the long term than if someone isn't quite transparent with you.
You mentioned subtop. Can you talk just a little bit about subspace and also top space?
Yeah.
So
I'm going to give you the neurological term. This is for the bingo list. Even the neurologists have got a term for this. It's called transient hypofrontality. And
Wall's got a line. I'm working on it. House.
And I like the fact that even neurologists have recognized this now. And this is basically the time when someone goes. I need both hands to describe this damage. So we've got the limbic system. That's the seat of our emotions. It's the seat of our 4 core drives. We've got the fighting, the fleeing, the fighting, and the fucking. The 4 Fs. Fornication for the Americans, for the American literature. It's fucking, yeah. The newer part of the brain, that's the cortex. That's on top. If this is the limbic system, the cortex is at the top. This is a rude gesture. It's the limbic system. And the prefrontal cortex, folks, it's the prefrontal cortex that winds down. The prefrontal cortex activates when you are all being the responsible adults in public, when you rein in your emotions, when you're planning, thinking, doing maths, doing admin, being the professionals in public, when you're doing the code switching, when you're talking to your grandma, not the same way as you would talk to your little nephew or to your kinky play partners or to your work colleagues. Those are the things when you're regulating your behavior. That's what's winding down during play sessions. And this is when the subspace kicks in. We retreat towards a more kind of a meditative state. This is also what happens when people meditate, when you guys do yoga, when you're switching off the noise in your mind and go internally to a calmer, serene place, when you don't have to think anymore. And this is one of the things what a lot of people, especially who do love being love so much. It's like an internal retreat. Did I answer your question? What was the other one? Subspace?
And top space.
Top space is sort of the top equivalent when someone is right in the moment and is focusing and isn't thinking of anything else. It's right there in the moment with the sub. So, would you elaborate on this?
No, yeah, I would agree. I mean,
much that, isn't it?
Albert and I both do rope a lot, and I find that even more meditative. I've done yoga, so the things I like that shut down that I've always enjoyed doing is always been doing yoga, martial arts, which Greg's got a background into, dancing. Funny enough, as in partner dancing, where you're able to focus. You have to be present, otherwise it all goes wrong. But then also there's an element of it that becomes muscle memory, so therefore you're able to do you see people dancing and their footwork just happens. Their brain knows to do it, and then you're then thinking about the next thing. And the same when you're doing rope or when you're doing play. There's an element that goes, I can do this automatically, but then there's an element that has to be present for safety, feedback, seeing what's going on. Much more in a top, because you have to be much more aware of what your body's doing. But I love it because you are not thinking about what you did 5 minutes ago, not thinking about what you're doing in 5 minutes time, but immediately in it. And the challenge I get, I mean, with what Deb was saying before, there's bottom drop and there's top drop, and both tops get the same thing as well, because our adrenaline and serotonin's shot up here as well. Also, the fact that you're concentrating so much, it's exhausting to be that focused for half an hour. I mean, if we're all in Teams calls these days, usually, if you're fully focused, you should be knackered after an hour of Teams calls, because you should have been listening, taking notes and everything else. If you're not, you probably weren't concentrating.
One of my kinky clients, he relaxes, it goes to that headspace to switch off by doing his flogging exercises. It just relaxes him, and he comes down a bit, focuses just on that and nothing else, and then he just feels a bit better afterwards. And eventually his body picked it up. We have a bit like a body memory. This is when we go to autopilot. You're not going to remember for that reason your everyday commutes. You just do it. Eventually, you're just going to do it automatically because your body has picked it up as well.
So you are in a state of flow?
Yeah. Flow. There's a really good book written about this by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. It's a Georgian American neuroscientist, and he wrote about this. It's related. I'm still not quite sure if that's the same thing. The flow state is the state of cognitive and mental effortlessness. When you're just right in the moment. Sports people particularly are aware of this. The more you guys practice something, and I would say King definitely applies to that as well. The more
Certain
you practice,
aspects of it.
Yeah, the more you practice something, musicians, sportsmen, they're the two prime examples. They don't have to think about it anymore. In fact, there's a really good example. There was an American golf player who, while he was still being a professional golf player, wanted to write a book about golf. Guess what happened? His golf playing went to shit. And his psychologist told him, well, duh, are you surprised? And he said, what do you mean? Well, look, you either do the golf playing or you write a book about it and analyze it, but you can't do both. That was the mistake he did. So he finished his golf playing, got the trophies he wanted to, and then was able to finish the book about golf playing, because you completely use different parts of the brain. And I think this is the other thing about this. When you analyze something, you don't really practice it. You go into the rational part of the brain. Whereas if you're doing something repeatedly, the limbic system and the rest of your body picks it up. So
David's got
one other analogy that's often good to think about with both subspace and top drop is that you're effectively pushing your metabolism. So all of these chemicals are flooding through, serotonin, endorphins. You're basically, for want of a better word, high. Now, the moment that stops, it doesn't all go away. So what happens is your body, under its what's called homeostasis, it produces a certain amount of those compounds. Once you've got too much in your body, it actually turns that off. So what happens is, after a period of time, you metabolize all of the fun chemicals you've been playing with, and your body then goes into deficit. And that's the point where things drop down and people feel depressed or low in terms of their energy, until their body kind of picks up again. Now, understanding that, and for some people it's a short process, some people it's incredibly quick, means that you can kind of judge and say, actually, at the end of a play session, what I need is a turkey sandwich, or what I need is just a tube of Smarties, just to give me that immediate sugar kick to get me back into a more normal state. Because you wouldn't run the London Marathon and then decide to sit down and play chess with your mate for 6 hours. It's just not the right thing to do. So think about the play that you do, the impact it has, and kind of be good to yourself afterwards. And the harder you play, the bigger the impact's going to be, because it's almost like going to a bar and drinking. If you keep putting it on your tab, at the end of the night, the more you drink, the more of a shock you're going to have. Exactly the same analogy. You play really incredibly hard and don't anticipate, then that bar tab is going to be quite horrific at the end of the night. Simple as that.
Or I'm looking forward to Monday because I've been partnering for 5 days.
Or not.
I'm not. Well, I don't think I'm going to actually see Monday. I think Monday's a write-off.
I've got nothing to add to this. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Group answer.
Before I ask my question, could you take my voice off the edited recording? Yeah.
Or if you want, you can ask me the question and I can repeat it for you.
Yeah.
The recordings go out live, so there's no editing.
So what if you have two people, I think you're playing together,
Well, yeah.
okay, different forms or incompatible types of aftercare?
Again, I would say before the need to aftercare comes even up, or discuss where the compromise, where the agreement could be set. Just so that you guys find some common denominator before even aftercare would be necessary, so that you guys are prepared.
But if they're massively divergent, as in one person needs to go out and do adrenaline sports, and the other one needs to stay home and sit on the sofa,
Okay.
alone in contact.
You might have to face if you should it be so divergent that you struggle to make a compromise. Discuss how it would realistically look like.
I usually call in reinforcements.
I was about to say you can always arrange to have someone else do aftercare with you.
Yeah, that's much having reinforcements.
Yeah. But again, if the partner would consent to have a third one there to add to the stability of that, then yes. But clarify as much of that as possible before it even comes to that. Because we all have got different needs. And yes, you're right, sometimes our needs can be completely divergent. See where the golden middle is.
To be fair, I've just been through that and had to end the relationship because it was way too divergent. Sadly,
I
that's just
want
one
to
way.
add this might be one of the things you guys might have to face. Before any of you are really in a dangerous emotional spot afterwards, you might have to forego the session. Because safety really comes first. I know I sound like a teacher here now, but
Well, you are in a
have to be
sort of way.
safe. So we have to be safe. And if you think that this emotional safety might be in jeopardy afterwards, precisely because of the divergent needs, you might not be compatible as play partners as well. I don't know.
My one was the fact I asked, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yes, I am." And then the following day, she said, "You should have asked again." I went, okay. So then I asked again. She said, "Fine." And then came back again and said, "You should have asked the third time."
Ultimately, she ought to have told you before, asked me many times afterwards. You see, this is the thing, don't make assumptions. Another reason why I'm on my soapbox constantly, transparency, put that on the bingo list.
Yeah.
Another reason why the more you are transparent and put the cards on the table, the less you need to make assumptions for exactly that reason. If those are your needs, tell your play partner, play your relationship partner. So.
Do it forward. So if you're doing kink long enough, when things go wrong, what would you suggest?
How do things go wrong?
You muck something up and things don't go right, or how they planned, or
Immature and disgusting.
Sex the mix.
yeah, just try to be sort of helpful advice.
I mean,
Kinks is when
I mean, don't
mucks up. So you flog them too much, or you
okay.
deep rope them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stay with your partner. Just because something went wrong doesn't mean that it instantly means the end of the relationship.
Cancel culture.
Unless it's really lethal. Continue the relationship, continue to be there for your play partner, and actually see. There's a really beautiful African proverb here, which goes, "Don't look where you fell, look where you slipped." The lesson is what led to the slippage. See to examine what led to it to have gone wrong and what you can learn from this. This might be actually part of the healing process, how you guys, because it's gonna go wrong. It doesn't matter how professional you guys are as kinksters. You're gonna have new play partners, new emotional needs, new angles of kinks you might not have come before or experienced like this. Things will go wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's actually even about this. It's about how do we deal with it afterwards. So stay with your partner and see what led to that, what you guys can learn and improve for the next time.
There's a great example. I'm one of the teachers that wrote later on. I had someone tie one of my previous partners, and you could see she's uncomfortable. Ropes isn't always comfortable. But then other people were starting to look in, going, oh, "Have you watched it?" And then eventually she said red and stopped.
Good.
So let them sort of him not so well deal with it. To go over and if you look at marks, so you can look at where ropes were marked, because you'll have the depth, and I can literally go, well, you got a nerve point, you got this, you got that, well, they've got circulation. And I hadn't seen the tie, I hadn't seen what tie had done, told me what tie had done. So how do you know that? So I can tell from the marks.
Valid point. Two things I'd like to elaborate on. The more specific and niche the kink is, the more you guys have to research. That's a really good example. Role play, there are certain neurological points you can't come close. Research, just to make sure that really you cut down on the risk factors. During the session, check repeatedly with your play partner, especially at the beginning. Always check. Even if your play partner gets a bit silent, I would take a break. And just to make sure, are you guys okay? Shall we take a quick break? And then you can continue. The more you guys trust each other, the more you guys have played, the more safer you'll feel. But especially at the beginning, things tend to go wrong, to my experience. When you
Advice
have
I give, we're doing road to be vocal. Right, don't expect to put one wrap round and you get stuff. I almost wouldn't want to tie something like that. Like, be vocal, does it hurt? What does it feel like? And again, it's specific. Like, oh, these fingers got numb. Oh dear. Yeah, like, grumble. Be vocal, let them know, and it'll be a better session. You don't have to stop as opposed to you didn't answer the fourth now. Oh, okay. Hang on.
yes, kids, don't be shy. Don't care if you don't or son. Tell what's going on. Always tell your play partner what works for you and what doesn't. The more you guys know, the safer you'll actually be. Yeah. So even obviously as well during the sessions, find as well a way to communicate things. Obviously, safe words. If you are gonna have usually a bunch of keys which you can then drop to indicate that there's something going right, or a certain way of, allow me Sarah, a certain way of tapping, find your language. It doesn't need to be verbal, it could be a particular sound. Find a way to communicate when things aren't quite that fun.
A really good one I remember seeing Anti-Panic. You get, I think there was some Cyberdog, a ball that dropped on the floor.
Yeah.
Just said that.
Because you can't hear anything, or you can't see too well in some of the clubs. But my word, this is doing a doing. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So all the other people around were like, oh, as well. Yeah.
Seriously, this is all non-verbals. Language is a big field. Find your own language for your relationship, for your play sessions. But the other one has to know what exactly is going on. So,
with that, I'd say never rush into anything.
Yeah.
There's no rush to do all this.
Yeah. It takes time to learn a language. Yeah. Craig and I are in the same position, but rarely would I ever agree to play with somebody on the same day I've met them. In the same way you don't have sex on a first date, you don't play on the first date. It's just not worth it.
Very interesting when I've been like house rigger venues, and I have that speech with them beforehand. Like, I will not tie you unless I have a speech beforehand to explain something.
That's what I meant. Don't rush it, guys. Give it time. The more you'd like to experiment, the more you need the trust, and the more you need time to actually build that level where you could do the play session. Something else which I really want to point out: don't do it when you're off your face. No. The amount of times I've been together with guys and then I just noticed he was off his face. Okay, one pint of beer maybe, that's fine, but you know what I mean. Especially at the beginning, you have to do it sober. If you can't face your sexual partner when you're sober, that already would be a red flag, to be honest with you. So please, no drugs.
It's
no
interesting,
alcohol.
because they said that it was interesting. The intro to DBS last night, they did the intro to newbies, and he said if you can't drive, you shouldn't play.
Yeah.
All mistakes are going to happen.
Yeah. Well, it just was a really good one. He said, well, if you're not fit enough to drive, you shouldn't be playing. I haven't got a driving license, but it made sense.
But you see, it's about the responsibility. And responsibility really precludes sobriety. The more you trust, maybe you can bit of poppers or a spliff or so, you'd be the main ones in charge. But especially again at the beginning, you cannot build trust with someone who's never there with you, but up in a mushroom cloud. Or, it's something else that really worries me, how much the booze and the drugs dominates our scenes. And that doesn't work when you really want to be professional players.
I mean, you'll see
And
it
I'm sure the
downstairs
safety
later on
is
if any of you, some of you got the white wristbands. You'll see before we let anybody cross the line to go and use the equipment, we'll check them for how much they're about to drink before we'll even let them into it. So,
especially with fetish parties that are quite clubby, you'll have people who would have some ecstasies or whatever, and then there's a dark room area, and I'm always worrying a bit. So yes, I'm showing my age, but certain things.
So this is a bit of a side question. I apologize.
No worries. No worries.
I've recently become infatuated with dronification.
Speak up. I'm holding
Oh, sorry, it's hard for me to project my voice, but I've recently become infatuated with dronification.
With?
Dronification.
Okay.
And one of the things that I've noticed is that, so it happens online. So I created a like online drone hive, right? And it skews young. And what I've noticed kind of to this point is there's a lot of subrush. So dronification is this like kind of delicious intersection of all these things. Hypno kink is one of them. And so what I found is a lot of younger people just want these like hypnophiles that are just like go straight into deep CNC. And
just look at my face.
And so so of course I'm like, hold on. And where I landed with it was to kind of like the entry level would be very safe. Like the hypnophiles would be like you always at the end of the day you have agency, da da da. And if someone really wanted to go deeper into CNC, it would be kind of behind some sort of like perimeter, secure perimeter, right? Where you have to build rapport and da da da.
Yeah.
There. But at the end of the day, it's still online, and so I'm still navigating it in real time. But I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts or experience.
Two things. First of all, it's online. So inherently it's a fantasy. Or it might be a quick whack behind the keyboard, nothing wrong with that. But for the long term, where would this go? This is something else I'm massively on my soapbox, the whole online thing, which is really dangerous, and it's one of the reasons why I don't even like posting anything online, because it's too easy to dehumanize someone else if we precisely don't see the one we're actually talking to and drop the message to. But in what, if that works for people, fair enough. Look at my surprised face. Because so far when we talk about sessions, we're talking of analog interactions. So I always wonder, okay, that works for you, fair enough. But I would doubt that is really going to be fulfilling for the long term. Eventually, we're going to need the human touch. Eventually, we're going to need some kind of human interaction and some validation of our feelings afterwards, especially when the session is over. So I'm not quite sure how.
Can I jump in on that?
Of course.
So just for context, I used to have a blog called Digital Aftercare, where I noticed that people in the hypno kink and people that looked at various sort of alternative content online similar to that, I noticed that they had the rush where it was, mine was like more focused on the people into humiliation, where they had that rush where it was like they're told they're this, they're told they're that, they're told they're this. And then afterwards they have no content that leads them back to where they were before, right? That's why it's called Digital Aftercare. And then to answer your question, the ones that I saw that were the safest were the ones that had certain phrases, and I call them like anchors, to remind them that, I don't know why I'm trembling, to remind them that like, it will only happen under these conditions where they feel this way, and it will have boundaries to stop them from feeling that way in other areas. and then at the end there would almost be some positive reinforcement of like, you've done this because you like this, and this is the insert humiliation line that you are, but outside of this content, you are this positive thing, and this positive thing to reinforce a good sense of self-esteem. Unfortunately, the ADHD kicked in, and then I stopped doing it. But I have a bit of experience in that, so to answer your question, I would say, if you're going to create it, you would want to do the same positive reinforcement you do in play, where it's like, hey, we get to know each other, I respect you, I care about you, this is the stuff that you want. And then after that, it's like, hey, great job for doing that, you are this, but you're also this, come back next time.
That sounds like aftercare to me.
Yeah.
It sounds
that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, for me, it sounds like you've gone through the 3 classic stages there. You've had a discussion, you set out what you're going to do, you do it, and then you repair it or reinforce it at the end. So you've done all 3 stages.
And that's what's absent online.
Yeah.
And that was what I was
my concern. I was just about to ask, how would the digital equivalent take place? Is there an option before people engage online? Look, this is the aftercare bit once we're done.
This is the warning about what you might feel. This is, as we were all just talking about, this is where you could go, this is where it could end up. Have you considered that before doing this activity? Maybe some of them haven't. Just got to go and get my rocks off and away I go.
My concerned looking face, certain things I can't imagine that you can recreate it digitally when there's the geographical distance from one PC to the other. Aftercare literally implies sometimes just a close proximity.
But again, as the young lady at the back said, I think it is different. I think we also have to bear in mind that with the digital native nowadays, people do absorb it in different ways. You just have to make sure it's there.
Okay.
I think it's just to transfer that from analog to digital.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, excuse my ignorance. What is hypno-kink? It was mentioned twice.
I don't.
People like hypnosis.
I mean, I always feel.
I never quite got it either.
I don't understand it. I don't think it should be in kink, what people.
I find it an odd one because it surely overrides consent.
Yes.
I can't give you a straight answer here. I mean, hypnosis, obviously, some might have a sexual component.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what the lady's opinion.
I was going to say it's a form of CBC, and so it's a way. So I'm new to it myself, and so I know just the context of clonification, and so briefly, at the TLDR, it's like you're hypnotized and such that you no longer have agency or identity. That's the kink. So you're just like a rubber plant, right? And so it's kind of crazy. That's what I learned is people are engaging in C&C just without just online, without not even with a GOM or another person. It's just they're finding files to do to themselves. And for the most part, it's like you mentioned, it's a fantasy, but there have been cases where people have gotten into trouble. It's led to abuse. But I also another thing that I think about a lot is some people, like me, for example. I think I'm the type of person who would go through hypnosis and be like, oh, that was fun, but I try to keep in mind that some people might be on some spectrum, which is where the reality gets a little bit, and that's something that anyone that I'm dealing with, I want to keep those guardrails in place, so I don't know, it's a super soupy, murky thing, and people, it's, online, people are just rushing to it, and all I can do is just my little corner is trying to keep it safe and controlled.
So kink does go through various things of our own pop culture, the things that are of the mode, and hypnosis is of the mode at the moment.
It seems a fad.
Yeah. But hypnotic suggestions, as I understand it, can't actually, all they can be is repressed, they can't be removed.
No.
And it's actually the skill of the person who's conducting the hypnotherapy about how they can actually manage those suggestions. So I think some of what you're saying is actually, if someone has engaged in a hypnotherapy kind of kink session, the way that that's actually dealt with and when someone is actually brought out of that hypnotherapeutic state, those suggestions will still be lurking in the subconscious, and it's actually with their conscious mind, there is actually this kind of conflict where people actually, because it was Darren Brown got into fucking shitloads of problems. Was it Darren Brown or the other one?
But the ones who did it as a stage act.
Yeah. So the ones that do it on stage, they've got into problems because actually all they do is they go like that to the suggestion. They cannot be erased. So the subconscious mind knows that there's a conflict going on, and then that results in cognitive dissonance when someone is actually kind of out of that therapeutic state. So I would question, so this is just my perception, the skill of the people engaging in that, how they're able to take someone down, what suggestions they put in place, how they're able to bring someone out, and actually what they do to manage the vulnerability of somebody that you have put into that hypnotic state.
That's also not uncommon for what we see in all kink, is that people think, oh, look at that, and just steam straight into it. You know, they don't even do the Googling necessary to inform themselves. They just wade into it. And I always feel, you know, having been behind the keyboard myself for a few years before it became popular, the good thing about it is now is that you and I are of a similar age. There was a time you didn't have access to any of this research. So you could actually, it was actually riskier without the internet, because you'd get into all sorts of scrapes, and you'd only find out those scrapes if somebody told you, like we're doing now. We never had this education. So, but there are still those people who will just dive straight into it. You know, there are still people who don't believe in looking left and looking right when they cross the road. Those people are never going to go away, unfortunately.
Yeah, I wouldn't have an issue with it when you exactly discuss, when I'm under hypnosis, you're allowed to do A, B, and C with me. You're not allowed to do X, Y, and Z with me. In that case, I wouldn't have much of an issue. And then discuss as well after.
I mean, it's interesting. It's a popular trope in science fiction.
Yeah.
That mode of where people have they lease their body out because they're hypnotized and they're not aware of what's being done to them, and then they have no consciousness whatsoever. Optimally, you don't come away with any marks going, how the hell did that happen? But you know, it's, you can see why it would be, but I suppose it's like anything. It's where on the risk spectrum is it? So you know, we always, Craig and I are very aware of the fact that when you look at risky activities, for kink, top of the list is waterboarding. Second down is rope. Where does hypnosis fit on that scale?
Can I tag on to what Sarah said?
Yeah.
So that's very true. I've heard that about you can't quash the triggers, you can only suppress them. That's why, and this links to an example I heard with NLP once. Some salespeople that used to use NLP back when it was a thing, neuro-linguistic programming, they could link a smell to a certain head state. So what they did was they would find a very unique smell that they're not going to smell anywhere else. And every time they're in a state of absolute confidence, because you know salespeople are awful, when they need a state of absolute confidence, they smell that smell, and then over time they've anchored that smell with absolute confidence. So a way to keep people safe, and I say this because I go to Hypno Kink Munches in my local scene and also in London. A good way to make it safe is if you're going to create that environment, coupled with the aftercare and also the contextualization at the beginning, if you're going to implant triggers, you want it to be part of the file, that they create a ritual or action that's unique to that file, that they're not going to do in their life anywhere else, they're not going to have done to them anywhere else, so that part of the file involves having just that trigger to get them there, and then afterwards it won't happen to them again, so it won't cross over into their life. And then, neurodivergent or not, ADHD, by the way, neurodivergent or not, because they've linked that ritual to that feeling and that sensation, and it won't happen in their daily life, it keeps them safe. And now I'll stop talking, sorry.
No, that's good. All useful stuff, thank you.
Can I just add on a little piece about screening as well? I don't have any knowledge or experience in Hypno Kink, but I do with hypnosis and therapy. There are certain mental health conditions where hypnotherapy, hypnosis of any kind is contraindicated. So anybody with a history of schizophrenia, where they may not be able to distinguish between imagined and reality worlds, you would, you know, if that was a hypnotherapist, they would say, well, you know, that wouldn't be necessarily safe for them. Same with people with bipolar, if they have during manic episodes some types of psychosis, again, contraindicated. It's worth just as part of before any of that kind of contracting piece, having those discussions. Is there anything on there that wouldn't be safe? And hypnotherapy is a good resource for where certain conditions would be contraindicated, and also like physical conditions. So if somebody's got like blood sugar, you know, diabetes, you would make sure that they did a blood sugar test to make sure that if they're not in hypnosis and they have a crash, so physical and mental health before any of that is like worth having a bit of research about.
The scope for potentially someone really being manipulated can be quite high. Again, be very careful. Again, make sure you trust the person you pay. If that's what you think is obviously fair enough. But set up exactly how it's going to pan out. Again, and I'm repeating myself, but make sure this is as transparent as possible, precisely when it gets into the subliminal stage. And when someone is under hypnosis, this is what's allowed, this isn't. So, and again, hence why I instantly frown my face. When this is taking place online, you have to particularly make sure that things are set in place where people are safe. And this is a general problem I have with online interactions. It's a limbo state, inherently still. Hence why
You're also dependent on hoping your Wi-Fi stays running.
Technology, yes. Yes.
Slap bang in the middle of something and your Wi-Fi goes down. You go, okay.
There's also the disinhibition effect online, where people are less
What's that one?
inhibited. It's
Disinhibition effect.
disinhibition effect. It's people are more vulnerable, let's say, online than they would be in person. It's just a part of, you know, any kind of online therapy. In person would be different too.
Is that so similar? Because I always say that the nice thing about being online is you can be anonymous. The bad thing about being online is you can be anonymous. Because there's a flip side of anonymous, you can be yourself. The flip side is you can be a dick and no accountability.
Yes.
And I think that's part of the problem when you say people are downloading these files. How can you give consent to something that you haven't listened to the entire file?
Yeah.
It
You
opens
don't
up
know what is in that file.
Yeah.
all kinds of
You're going to
dangers.
put
Yeah.
headphones on, go into hypnosis. You can't really consent to something where you don't know what the content of that
My
file
tip for that,
is.
because I do that sort of thing for work. Yeah. My tip for doing things like that, because I do it for work for a different reason. Just get a transcript, run it through a transcript so you can read it.
That's very good.
Yeah.
I'm just so interested by what you do
Many things.
Feeling.
No, it's for a completely separate thing. You need transcripts of things. And then we feed through an AI.
Some people that have some experience in doing. What I've done is a baseline. It's in a baseline file. So basically, because the analogy is like you're a host and you're like partitioning like a section of the hard drive for like this drone OS thing, right? And so as a baseline, I've kind of designed it, redesigned it such that it's like the host always has final, it's like the root user, right? So the host can always exit out and have the final agency. And that's, so in a lot of files online, you don't allow that backdoor for the agency. They remove it. And so that was kind of our solution for how to keep this as a baseline safe. It's like, you don't need your own space, but if you ever feel unsafe or if your host ever feels unsafe, you can put it in an uncode, exit out, or whatever. That was.
Then you are talking to someone who won't even listen to audiobooks while I'm sleeping. Yes. Don't trust it. Any other questions? Yeah. That was an awesome question. That's good. I enjoyed that.
I was interested with couples coming into this sort of new space. Obviously, consent is very, very obvious and easy to understand for the two people that are engaged in something. How does sort of partnership and partner consent and sexual jealousy, and how does that murky water kind of work in real life, if that makes sense?
I mean, that's the greater picture of the relationship you're in, isn't it? And whatever you guys are discussing, this is surely part and parcel of however you're exchanging, however you're throwing things. And then part of what you would like to do sexually and emotionally should be part of this as well. Keep the communication channels open.
So it's bringing any additional partners into those discussions about what's going to take place and the consent.
Depends
net
what
kind of
depends.
broadens,
It
if that
depends
makes
what
sense.
you're doing. Whether you're doing things together with a third or fourth or
Do
fifth
you
or
mean a
sixth.
polyamorous setup or polysexual
I
setup?
don't know. As in just any others and just kind of how do you include your partner into consent, contracting, agreeing, and also somebody being able to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with it, even if they're not involved. You know, how does that kind of work in real life?
I mean, a starting point usually are your emotional needs and your sexual needs, and then that of your partner and how you coordinate it. And then if you would like to bring a third party or a fourth party into this.
I mean, I have a checklist. I posted it on FetLife the other day, but it was given to me. You carry on. I'll find it and I'll show you.
and again, you have to relentlessly talk it through as transparently as you can. Especially, this is an advantage of you being a woman. You will have much more of an emotional insight. A lot of guys struggle with this, I've noticed. This is one of the positives I noticed in my therapy work. I'm getting more male clients. When I started 10 years ago, most of my clients were LGBT and women or presented women. More guys now talk about this. So, especially for the guys, practice listening to your gut feeling as opposed to being up in your heads. This might be something I would suggest. If that's your partner, tell them, look, you're up in your head again. It's really about the emotional presence and then inside of what our emotional needs are at the first place, what our sexual needs are at the first place, and then expressing it and then coordinating it.
I mean, a friend of mine, she sent me 11 questions that she asked all of her partners. The first one was, what would you want from our play specifically, if anything, and what areas do you want to explore if you have any? That's an obvious one. What are your favorite types of play to give and to receive? Was another one. How do you prefer to communicate? Message, call, voice notes, in person? What and how much interaction do you want or not want from me? How do you navigate your play relationships around any primary or other significant relationships? Will our interactions cause any problems, issues to you or other in your life or partners, be it family or not? Do I need to be aware of any dynamics or relationships that may affect our interaction? Do you have any triggers? I know Debs doesn't like the word trigger. She used another phrase now.
Rupture and repair.
But yes, essentially, because you said triggers are something that happened to you, whereas you want to take your own agency of it and how you react to it. So you're not actually triggered. Do you have any triggers? Conversely, do you have any glimmers you'd like to know me about, which is the opposite of triggers, are things you like? What aftercare do you look for? What do you need? What are your hard soft limits? And can you give me an example of a positive interaction you've had, or conversely, if you're comfortable, a negative one?
That's a really good set of questions.
Wow.
Yeah. Just
You put that on that.
Yeah.
that's on FetLife on one of my posts.
I'll get it.
If you put this maybe on the land.
Yep.
Yes.
But you see, there are all kinds of questions that will inevitably.
But you have to answer them honestly.
Yeah.
And as Deb was saying, I think you said it before as well. If you're going to do it, try and do it sat down in person. Don't do it sat opposite one another. Sit at 45 degrees.
Slight angle.
Yeah, like we are now. It's much more conversational and not confrontational. If you sit opposite somebody, it's very confrontational.
Remember, it's teamwork. It literally is that.
That's something you'd have to actually phrase the right way. Because
I mean, that's just an example. I've changed a few of them.
issue, but it's going through the same opening up. And although it's got a kink orientation, actually, this is just a relationship.
But a lot of people have never sat down and done that. I mean, most of us.
I mean, this is the thing. Actually, or a lot of it, what we talk about in the scene is actually, well, it's just a little bit of a highlighted or sort of slightly nuanced relationships. And it's the same rules apply, can be applied across all relationships. The transparency of the communication, the main cards on the table.
Except obviously when you do, and we haven't got the one up this month, but if you do impact play, it's probably one of the few you could actually end up in court for.
Yeah. Yeah, continue the process. There's no other way of chatting it through.
But sometimes, I mean, I found that useful because I didn't know what questions to ask. So actually having a prompt, I found it just really useful for that. And I swapped some of them out where it says play, I've said rope.
That answers your question.
I'm only going to ask one then, since I've been very active. And that's gone from my brain. Someone else have a go. I'll come back in a minute.
Let me elaborate one of the things, especially for us guys, we really need to practice this just to be less in our heads. It's something I've noticed. Us guys, we really have been brought up to be the fixers traditionally, the providers. And this really clashes when we are trying to forge loving relationships, because relationships aren't rational. We are not commonsensical beings. There's the misconception that we're thinking beings who feel occasionally. No, it's the other way around. We're emotional beings who sometimes do some thinking. And this is from most of my guys, it's usually about communication, but there's a clash. Inherently, it's that old book, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It basically highlighted for the first time properly with this different upbringing, transgenerationally as well.
There's a tip in there. None of us are from Earth, apparently.
And I was in a shop once, and I did find a postcard. Men are from planet Earth, women are from planet Earth. Deal with it. But it does highlight the different upbringing, and especially to my male clients, I always emphasize it as well. I'd like to do this here as well. Listen to your gut feeling.
Yeah.
We tend to be way too much up in our heads, trying to. I mean, it's the classical scenario where the woman exasperatedly shouts, "You just don't listen to what I say," when the guy wanted to help, but just was able to respond, "Well, darling, if that didn't work, why don't you try A, B, and C?" And this really doesn't help. It's much more about emotional validation. And this is something I had to explain to many guys. Look, you don't have to fix anything, but just be there with your partner.
Although my ex-wife did give me the t-shirt saying, "You know, I'm probably not listening, don't you?"
Okay.
No, the question I asked was about.
Yeah.
I said when things get really, really toxic, and you have to be very. I'm very empathic about feeling other people, but it gets to a certain point where you just have to cut that person out of your life. But I found that actually very difficult to do. And I know that this isn't like a free therapy session, but I'm always worried about what happens to the person on the other side to be cut out of. Is there ways of approaching that, or is it reaches a certain point where you just have to say enough is enough for your own mental health, which it was for me?
That was actually what I was getting at. If you already have reason enough to cut out a person because you deemed him or her too toxic, then you already made a decision.
Right.
You can only be accountable for your own stuff, never of that of someone else. This is one of the hallmarks of us being adults. Damn it, I call it the nappy principle. We're old enough to have outgrown our nappies because we are expected to be old enough to be on top of our own shit and don't lump it at others. Sometimes someone isn't, for whatever reason. And if you have made a decision to cut out someone like this, then you already made the decision and you're entitled to continue with your.
Well, it was only because it was a series of. I realised that you get messages somebody calls them, and like we're talking about sub drop, just getting dropped, you immediately get a mood drop. You can just see it ping up as a message. This is going to be. And I realised that if I'm feeling that way, it's not good.
Yeah.
I can't take responsibility for their. If I've done it, but there's a balance in there, especially if you feel you have been the cause of that.
If you feel there might be a scope to resolve something still, you could always ask, "This bugs me, would you like to have a chat with me and see if we can resolve this?" The question is, what do you do if you're not given the chance? Then it really will be up to you and say, "No, this is as good as it can get. I'm going to crack on with my life."
Cool.
This is one of the hallmarks that makes us adults. We can make choices. And we can only be responsible accordingly to what is for us to solve, what is for us to be responsible for. We can't take responsibility of other people. This is one of the things where a lot of relationships crumble when we call it C-pitch, when someone has a traumatic childhood and is unresolved and it keeps on coming up in the relationships. It isn't for the partner to resolve the trauma of the traumatized person they're together with. This is where I'm a massive stickler for having clear boundaries. The more you have an awareness of the area of your responsibilities, the more you'll have an awareness as well of the boundaries, where you'll have to tell your partner, "This is something I'm in charge of. This is something you are in charge of." If you struggle, seek a therapist. As a partner, I love you, but I only can empathize and hold you but I can't resolve this for you. That is important. And sometimes that's a good idea to really explore this. You're going to have people in your lives, they have so much unresolved shit with them still. You're going to feel this, but the only thing you can realistically do as the friend, as the partner, as the play partner, you can only empathize and you can express your concern. But beyond this, there isn't much else you can do. It's not your responsibility. It's not your job. You're meant to be the partner, the girlfriend, the boyfriend, the play partner, or so. You could even marry. But beyond this, you can't be the therapist. You can't be the mother, the father. It's quite important to have really realistic standards and expectations. So,
thank you.
And the choices you can make accordingly. So whenever you notice you're getting the twinge of guilt, you can decide, is there a scope to resolve this? Yes or no. If there's maybe a yes, approach the person in question. If he or she says no, then you're entitled to crack on with your life. So, there might be a slight tinge of uncertainty, and I can't stress this enough. You'll never have 100% certainty in your relationships with anyone, and that's fine. It's only an uncertainty. It's not a catastrophe. We're all allowed to have our little secrets. We're all allowed to have our own little things we're not sure about. That makes us the imperfect human beings that we are. Or the fuck-ups on two legs, as I call it. But I'm a bit more cynical. So, go.
You mentioned trauma. So I've read online, and I spoke to people like friends and other therapists. Some people view that BDSM, probably on the conservative side, BDSM kink is an unhealthy expression of unresolved trauma, and others to see it as a way to achieve some form of healing or connection, etc. Do you have any particular view or any examples that you're happy to share?
How much time have we got left?
No, you have actually got 20 minutes.
You see, it's another reason why I pointed out the importance when someone really isn't on top of something. A hallmark of trauma is precisely something that keeps on coming up again and again. We always say, what you resist persists. If it is something like this that repeatedly comes up, it needs to be resolved. It's usually done with a professional in the field. There are specific trauma therapists. The more you can resolve this, the more you'll be aware to separate your sexual needs from your emotional needs. One of the hallmarks of trauma, inherently, it is a very intense form of stress. What are the symptoms of stress? You've got fight, flight, and freeze. Now, when someone is
fornicate as well.
That's the other thing. That's another big system.
Don't you did 7, but I can never remember them all.
Flop. I know they're the reason why they found out. Flop.
Fight, flight, flop, fawn, freeze. We got most of them.
But in terms of trauma, it's the frozenness that is really crucial. When someone is frozen for a long time and doesn't resolve the trauma, there's a lag in development. There's a lag of some sort in the emotional development. This can clash when you really want to do the kink thing, when you really want to fulfill your sexual needs. Because when your emotional needs aren't resolved, you'll mix the levels, and it can cause all kinds. You could be re-triggering yourself, basically. You might have something you might sexualize in your adult headspace, but you haven't actually emotionally processed it yet, and you could re-trigger yourself. I don't recommend it. Always go to a therapist first if there's really something that's unresolved since your childhood days onwards. Once that is clear, it clears up your headspace for whatever else you'd like to explore, either emotionally or sexually.
Can you give an example of how that might manifest? Because obviously you said we're not therapists. So I mean, it's probably thousands of different examples because everyone's different.
I mean, the hallmark thing was rape fantasies. If that really is an issue with sexual abuse, I would strongly advise have this sorted first with a therapist until you're really over this. Otherwise, it can't be kink play. You will most likely re-trigger yourself. As a therapist, for me, this is a major red flag. I know I sound a bit judgmental, most likely, but you have to be safe. I wouldn't risk it. This is one of the things I would really clearly separate.
But doesn't that cross over into some of the CNC stuff?
even if you would, but you see, even if you would agree that this is the session, how would you know the outcome? You could still be triggered, precisely if you have never properly healed emotionally, if you have never properly overcome it and resolved it, if that still is an open wound.
It's a tricky thing to talk about on the first date, doesn't it?
I wouldn't talk about it. If someone wants to do rape play or so something, I would see the bigger picture as much as you can before you actually do any playing.
Yeah.
Again, this brings us to what we discussed before. Get to know your play partners as good as you can. And yes, pay attention as well what the kinks are. The kinks usually are a reflection. Sartre said this at the time. He said, childhood decides. Our kinks have history.
Penelope Pitstop.
And see that if you have a slight doubt how compass mentis someone is, if you have a slight doubt if someone might not have actually resolved something that's still haunting him or her, I would first tell the client, look, see to resolve this one. I'm not quite sure if we should go there at this stage.
Can I ask
Dr.
about
Say,
humiliation and degradation as kind of the legacies of childhood and adolescent trauma in that parental role, and actually it being played out by the Dom as some kind of meta way that they're kind of empowering themselves from when they were traumatized?
Don't.
It's all right. It's all right. You've still got 17 minutes. You can give that one a go. Can you break that one down?
So you use rape trauma,
yeah.
But I think there is elements of humiliation, degradation, and humiliation that also have their tendrils that go back into childhood, adolescent trauma with poor parenting.
Yeah.
Now they can manifest themselves, whether as a submissive, this is what you seek because you seek to have this replayed because this is what you were normalized with, or if you have a dominant who uses that as his way to kind of not feel as less emasculated as possible because now they are the owner of this. That's what, because I see that also as unresolved trauma that is far more insidious than maybe, and I'm not negating rape, but I'm saying that that's actually far more universal to a lot of us having that kind of abuse and subjugation. Sorry.
Where do you start?
Sorry. All right. Sorry, Hal. We'll talk about it later. It's all
But I
right.
mean, the reason I initially said don't is because you guys need to be safe. And the more we're at peace with ourselves, this brings us back to your initial question with identity. This is what makes a coherent identity of someone, when precisely we know what our demons are, what we have to fight, and what we eventually are at peace with. If someone isn't quite at peace with X, Y, and Z, it could be precisely this, the kind of fantasies of, rape fantasies or so. With the slightest smidgen of doubt, I wouldn't go there. Discuss it. Look, something that repeatedly comes up.
You said about the
resolve this.
You said about the degradation and humiliation, though. I mean, I suppose the question to add on top of that is that if you've had a bad day, the answer is not to take it out by spanking somebody.
Yeah.
But there are some people who are said, if you've had a bad day, come and take it out on me. So where's?
But not everyone who so I'm going to be, whether it's a little anti-role modeling,
Go for
not all DOMs are going to be well balanced.
No.
Insightful, have done work on themselves. You have people who are kind of verging on whether it's sociopath, antisocial, so have personality disorders, have the don't give a fuck, and actually have found the Dom community and that king as a way that they can manifest where they're feeling actually quite subjugated in their own ego. If I'm a Dom, come on then. And that's where I found that people can actually be verging on dangerous, but because they have that ego, but humiliation and degradation is a real power hierarchy there. And I think with your Hypno Kings also, there's that fear of having that laid but I'm just wondering about, because the vulnerability of positioning yourself in your submissive kind of identity and actually wanting that, there is echoes. So there's loads of very subtle echoes between childhood trauma, both for the top and the bottom, and actually how to manifest them. And not everyone is going to have worked on themselves. There are lots of arseholes and wankers, male, female, all genders, who actually are in the community.
It's another reason why I keep on emphasizing the bond, the relationship, precisely if you want to go deeper into the head fuck scenes. Eventually, through the process of your relationships, you're going to notice if there are particular trigger points that repeatedly come up. Those would usually point to something that is unresolved in one form or another. Hence why I said, even at the slightest doubt, support your partner. Look, this might be something worth looking into before we sexualize it. You actually might not be ready for this. You actually might not have the emotional maturity to go through this one. You might be possibly re-triggered in one form or another, and I don't want that to happen.
I mean, into your work, I mean, I've simplified it in the past. Is the person dominant or domineering? Because they're not the same. And people get the two confused.
Oh, it's the persona,
Yeah.
and then it just gets a little bigger, and there's a bit more of an attitude there. But actually, the most amazing dominants I've ever encountered are thoughtful, deep, sensitive human beings who actually don't need to be the hey. Do you know what I mean? The big I am, because it's an oxymoron to their dominant persona.
They don't need to put on a false front.
Yeah.
So.
Got 12 minutes. Any more questions?
Any more
12
questions?
minutes.
I had another one for highly empathic, empathetic people. Obviously, consent and boundaries, and knowing what your boundaries are and knowing when they're being crossed. How do you kind of really hone that skill of not taking too much responsibility for the other person? Like, say the other person's really into what's going on and you're not.
Ask questions.
Yes, and kind of how obviously that would play out in a kink scenario. If you're like, oh, they're really into it, I don't want to mess up what they're enjoying, but actually
Doesn't matter. It's always yourself first.
Is it just that the community is so kind of on it that those sorts of old habits? Because obviously, like, there's been times where we're all in a conversation with somebody in the real world, and you're thinking, I don't like this at all, but you don't want to be rude and say, can you just shut up?
Oh, I am.
Things like that.
I would recommend actually don't be rude.
Yeah.
Rather be rude and authentic and
Yes.
transparent than just assuaging someone.
Brutally honest.
and I wouldn't care what the community around you says.
And is
What
that more the norm, I guess, where those are sort of like, it's actually really important.
I can only say as a top or a dom or a doer, as I say, yes, I'd welcome that. There are some, as you said, some people's egos are so fragile they can't take it. Well, there's a red flag for you straight away.
Yeah.
If they can't take it, you don't want to go anywhere near them.
Look, inherently, the norm is something you create with your partner, according to the rules you set up that work for both of you. That is the norm. Anything else what the community thinks is irrelevant. You set up the rules that work for you and your partner and whoever else is involved. And you work on that, you explore, you draw boundaries, you redraw them as fit. But that is the norm you're setting.
That's a nice
You see, you're right.
reframe.
Because the community is just the collective of individuals in
Yeah.
the community.
Yeah.
And they're just full of good people and shitheads.
And
it doesn't
somewhere in
matter
between.
whether
And some people fluctuate between the two, as I
it's-
say,
Yes,
individual.
Yes, precisely. Precisely.
or following football, or being a train spotter, whatever.
I know which I
Community is
prefer.
just a- Community of people is just people, and you got to set out your own eggs and boundaries and just say, this is my world, this is the way I interact.
But it is true, the gut instinct thing. The number of people I know said, there was something about it, I couldn't put my finger on it. Well, then you're probably right, because your instincts will save you every single time.
Focus your gut. Your gut feeling really lies here. I can't stress it enough. It's usually an indicator towards some kind of a red flag. If it doesn't quite feel safe, listen to it and just take a break and go through it again.
So just because you've got this scene, this community that seems to be aware of self-aware, it largely is innocent. Because there are dogs who know what they're talking about and know how to behave. There are dogs who are just dickheads who are just And hey, that's the same in everything, any type of community.
It's also about fads. There might be some. I've noticed there are always some fads from year to year within our communities that might be relevant to you and your play partner, or it might be. See if it works, but it doesn't have to be just because everyone else is doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that I took a break between 2014 and post-pandemic. Two things that still freak me out, and I've been doing it since '92, is the whole daddy thing that came along. Freaks me the hell out. Totally understand it, it's just not my thing, so that's a limit. And then the whole marks. The fact that now you go on to pictures of people proudly demonstrating bruises, and unfortunately we haven't got the banner up, but it's actually illegal.
You don't know, according to British law, anything that isn't transient or trifle is blatantly illegal in this country still.
So you cannot, it was the result of the Spanner Trust case, Operation Spanner, which led to the fact that anything that you cannot consent to anything that is more than trifling or transient. So if you've ever had a love bite, you have broken the law. Because it's actual bodily harm.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that and
So-
registered to teachers who
Yeah.
are for educational practices.
But what it does mean though, is thankfully the police force are now somewhat more they're a lot much more aware. But what you can actually do is there's been scenarios where people have gone for a medical exam and a doctor noticed they're black and blue. And they go, what happened? They said, I'm into BDSM. Now most doctors will go, fine. Most go, what's that? I'm going to report this. And they can report it on your behalf. You do not have to be involved. So the fun part is now you see on FetLife and everyone else posting these purple asses. And I'm just going, really? I used to take it as a pride of a badge of honor that I actually managed to have a great time, make their ass go red and leave no marks. Now it seems to have gone the other way. But that's just, again, it's one of those trend things. And I don't know what's going to come along next, but then Craig and I love rope. You leave rope marks, but they will be gone unless you pinch them or something. But usually they'll be gone within an hour. You do sometimes see, friends of ours post pictures going, I forgot I was wearing a short skirt today, and there's all these rope marks. And I've seen a few business women in suits with handcuff marks. And I think either you had a really good weekend or you had a really good weekend. And so but it came out of that. You cannot consent to actual bodily harm.
If you have a look on the LAM thread,
Yeah.
there are a lot of legal references.
Yeah.
Read up. This country is really lagging behind. And if you ask me,
Thankfully, none of it, rarely any of it has gone to court. But the reason it's there is because of domestic violence. Because there was a case where they said, "Oh, we're into BDSM." No, he just liked beating the shit out of her and used it as an excuse. So that one did go to court because people are more educated now, and LAN themselves, we provide legal support to anyone who has a problem with that. We'll provide funding for lawyers and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's a really grey area in what we're doing. So yeah.
No one said with sort of dead speech, saying it has risk like groups and whatever. Martial arts is a great one.
Yep.
Depending on how black and blue are, because black and blue people too much in martial arts.
Sports generally,
yeah. Doing pole or aerial things. Because
Rock climbing is the other one.
Yeah, rock climbing. Full rock climbing.
martial arts.
Yeah, any contact sport, you can then blag it in. I was tackled repeatedly for several hours. Why is one of the brews reading Dunlop?
So you mentioned throughout all of this, you mentioned red flags a lot. What are some, when you're going and you're meeting people, what are some green flags? Someone who's at least done some work on themselves, who just things. I mean, it's an art, not a science, right? But what are some things that you can spot in a person that are green flags that could potentially save you a lot of hassle later down the line?
They've got beards.
No, not necessarily.
They don't pick up a fuss when you say no.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Another one is just any relationship thing. They ask you questions about you. They take interest in you.
Precisely, they take actual genuine interest in you, and they're comfortable in themselves. um, you know that someone isn't lying, someone isn't pretending. What Sarah just said, you haven't got someone in front of you who's trying to mark the big bloke. When someone is embracing his vulnerabilities, when someone tells you honestly, actually, this isn't something what I'm interested in or good at, but I'd be happy to learn about this one and ask questions, and is honest and doesn't pretend. That's a massive green flag for me when I notice that I can be really comfortable in the presence of someone because there's a trust that someone isn't bullshitting. You know?
Understanding the key, sometimes it's not the right word, the key traits of somebody who's empathetic or what empathy is, and look for those in the person.
Yeah.
Because really good sociopaths and their likes come across as really nice people.
That's why.
Oh, they're charming.
Love bombing.
Fantastic. So look, but they will lack the empathy traits because they can't. Well, you can.
Learn it, though.
You
They
can, but
They can
you
only
have to be
pretend.
really intending to take it forward.
Sociopaths, they can come across as empathic, and they only do it if it's a benefit to them.
Yeah.
So they never actually follow it through. They never actually, never follow through for the long term. So
Short-term gain for them.
whereas
It's like
a green,
apparent emotional intelligence.
yeah, whereas another green flag is when someone is reliable, when someone is there
And
is a
consistent.
man or a woman
And
of his
there's no
word.
benefit to them to do so.
Yeah. Precisely. That's another green flag. When you can rely on someone and actually follows through as agreed and
And
does
con-
it persistently.
And consistency is another one.
Yeah.
It's a really good green
Yeah.
flag.
Consistency. When someone consistently really is there, is reliable, and does so as agreed.
How they act to other people.
Yeah.
I mean, look, yeah. The question. Can I ask a reverse question? Are you talking about online or in person?
I don't do anything online.
Good.
It's always in person.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. But yeah, no, just in person. But the only reason I ask is I mean, I'm quite an empathetic person, but I sometimes look at some people when I meet them and I just get this weird gut feeling that they're telling me all of the right things, but there's just something
Trust
not
it.
quite right.
Just trust it. Just trust it.
I used to be like you say, an in my head kind of guy, and I've done a lot of work on myself to be an in my gut kind of guy. But sometimes I think with my me parts rather than my brain, and I just need to know.
Your gut is actually a really primitive brain, and gut feeling actually is a very, very old part of us that actually tells us this situation isn't good or it is good. And there's a lot of very subliminal messages going on around us all the time that our gut, the neurosystem that is the gut, is actually picking up on and knows this is good or this is bad.
The limbic system, that is, it's also called the paleomammalian brain. That is the oldest part of our brain. And actually,
Is that the lizard part?
That is kind of, it isn't called the lizard part anymore, but
Okay.
it used to be for that reason, because it is so old. And it is that part of the brain that is connected to our autonomic nervous system, not our prefrontal cortex, I had mentioned before. And so I'm emphasizing, listen to your gut feelings. There's another book called The Other Brain. Neurologists have found out in the last generation.
I've heard about that, and men have it a real problem.
I don't know, you think.
Not that one.
Oh, the other brain.
There are basically as many nerve endings in our gut than in our brains. The old Greeks thought for that reason that the seat of our souls is here. The old Egyptians, they didn't know what to do with the brain. They flushed it out with through the nostril and kept the heart in a golden goblet. So this is something,
So,
your gut feelings,
so
basically.
we're at time. Is there anything you want to summarize?
Guys, thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm knackered now, but thank you. Appreciate it. If you've got any more questions, just